I'm Sarah Patterson, and this is James Casey, also known as Jim Casey, and we are representing the Color Conventions Project. The author, Elizabeth Gilbert, has said that there are two types of people that you'll often meet in the world. There are the doers and the innovators, the creators, and then there are the people who want to be doers, who want to be innovators. And we have to thank the NEA for being the bridge that puts the what to be into the doers, right? The dreamers into the doers. So the thing that I want to talk about really quickly is what we do. We are a project team of over 20 of undergraduates, graduates, librarians, and community members. We work together to collaborate to build the colorconventions.org site.
So the Color Conventions were meetings held during the 19th century, starting in Philadelphia in 1830, spreading to 30 different states across the country, involving thousands and thousands of people, including some of the most famous African-American figures, people like Frederick Douglass, to many, many thousands more whose names we're just beginning to know and just beginning to learn about. And so as part of that, we've been working to collect materials, to build curricular materials, and to think about ways to get a handle on this big, giant history of the long trajectory of Black activism in the United States. As part of that?
Well, we are fine with geeking out over these materials and reading dense congressional-style minutes. We also know that people learn differently. So we have national teaching partners, book contributors, and student contributors that build our site, grow our archive, and that build interactive exhibits. So we have folks like Benjamin Fagan, who's at Auburn University, and we have folks like Erica Armstrong Dunbar, who is a director at the Library Company in Philadelphia, and also the inaugural director of the Next Generation grant that UB has won, also from the NEH. So we have a lot of thank yous to pass out to the NEH. Oh, I guess I should say over hundreds of students have been involved in the curriculum and in building exhibits.
And in building up our archive and collecting minutes and records and proceedings for what we've realized were hundreds of conventions held all across the country, we wanted to make these documents usable and searchable and shareable in all the kinds of ways that are important to us that sort of parallel the Punk Archive. And it was also important for us to involve the communities where this history happened in that preservation. And so as part of that, we've launched Transcribed Minutes, which invites volunteers to come in and help us correct and create transcriptions so that we can both share these things, be able to find things easily, and also to be able to start to think about more advanced text mining and network analysis and really begin to grapple with just how enormous the history of Black activism in this country really is. And that's it. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
My name is Nick Ray. I'm the technology director for the Search for Harmony, which is a web-based game that informs students about the influence on classical music by those of African descent. Many people know Beethoven by name, but far fewer know George Bridgetower, who is an Afro-European violin prodigy who worked with Beethoven and was a skilled musician in his own right. Our game hopes to bring his story and others like it to middle and high school youth, leveraging both a web and mobile approach to better reach students where they are, as well as disadvantaged youth. The content also builds on the Spark Media documentary Sonata Melodica, coming next year and covering the same subject matter. Our story follows Maestro, a fantastical being who has lost his friend Harmony, and to find her, he must travel through worlds reflecting different points in history, rebuilding the bridges that once connected them by collecting pieces of musical scores. Along Maestro's journey, the player experiences diversity in music and learns more about this legacy. As part of our plan for this game, we've asked, how can we help build more humanities games? Well-constructed games have a powerful ability to engage students with content by providing short-term incentives to learn knowledge that gives them long-term value. But technology challenges exist for the creation of these games for web because development involved can be costly and time-consuming. We are modeling the software for this game as a documented open-source WordPress plugin married to an open-source HTML5 game engine now in existence. Thus, what is produced as a result of our efforts and our use case could be repurposed for similar games in art, history, and other areas of the humanities, lowering barriers for their creation by providing software that gives them a starting point for many of their needs. We found music education groups in this space and found that there were needs related to community building and ongoing content connections with students, both of which our game intends to help foster through social interactions related to the game and a chapter-based structure that can be added to even after the initial story is complete. So, for example, if 2 or 3 organizations are using this tool in their own contexts and it continues to evolve, additional modules could provide them the opportunity to expand on the curriculum covered in their use case. Some examples of these mini-games might include scavenger hunts, Where's Waldo or The Room, or a few games to help illustrate that, and platformers such as Super Mario or Sonic the Hedgehog are a few examples of that. So we're now evaluating different formats of game modules that fit well within a humanities story related to historical diversity in classical music, but would also make sense in another storyline covering another subject. Part of this test is to break down the type of game into its component parts to see if it can be used in multiple situations, which you see a few examples of. Our end result hopes to be both a compelling prototype informing students about diversity in music and a documented tool that can aid future humanities projects in the creation of their own games with educational impact. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Catherine Buell. I'm a mathematician, and I'm proud to represent a diverse team working on this project, which we affectionately call WAVES. WAVES stands for Workflows for Analysis of Images in Visual Stylometry. Visual stylometry is an interdisciplinary field that combines research from art history, philosophy of art, cognitive science, computer science, and mathematics. And it has the potential to reveal novel facts about the relationship between artists, artworks, and the consumers. The goal of this project is to develop a tool, WAVES, which is for digital image analysis that is powerful enough to support research in this field, as well as providing an accessible interface that can be used by researchers and students without any knowledge of computer science, programming, or mathematics. We hope that this can also be used as a pedagogical tool in the humanities and STEM classrooms. How we go about doing this is through WINGS. WINGS is a program you can see up on the screen here, and it gives us access to scientific workflows. What these are, essentially, is a way to represent complex programs or algorithms, like the ones that are listed at the top of this slide, except you represent them as graphical boxes. And these graphical boxes can literally be dragged and dropped onto a user interface and linked together. You can also have pre-packaged programs. What's really nice about this is they're web objects, and they're executable with a click of a mouse. Again, no programming. What is really nice is we allow room for students and researchers to formulate and verify new research and questions, because you can drag and drop any artworks that you have access to into this program and run things. So far, we spent the summer doing a lot of coding with students up there and collaborators, taking both our research in the area as well as current research in the area and turning it into open source code. All of this will be completely open source and web-based. I will talk about fall as we prepare for spring. Since we are in DC, acronyms galore. So we're working with the Fitchburg Art Museum, and they are supplying us with artwork as well as a space to trial the tool. So the tool will be available to all visitors to the museum, including school groups. It will also be available in both English and Spanish to support the community that we're part of. From there, we'll host a workshop where we invite local art educators, artists, philosophers, people in the aesthetics, to come working with the New England Museum Association to put that together, and finally creating a user interface with a user interface designer to make it best for schools, museums, and researchers. Thank you. I'm Ann Knowles, a founding member of the Holocaust Geographies Collaborative. Since 2008, we have been developing methods to analyze and represent the profoundly geographical nature of the Holocaust. We first used Geographic Information Systems, GIS, to map the plans and actions of Nazi perpetrators and their allies. The map you see is one example. It shows forced evacuations from the Auschwitz camp system in January 1945. The Nazis famously generated copious documents. As you can imagine, however, those records say little about the experiences of victims like Leon Wells. The image of Dr. Wells beside the map comes from a video interview conducted with him in 1996 by the USC Shoah Foundation's Visual History Archive, our group's new collaborator.
The Holocaust Geographies Collaborative is now using our NEH Digital Humanities Startup Grant to learn new methods to mine survivor interviews for their spatial content. Our long-term goal is to integrate victims' experiences and movements into the Nazi universe of camps, ghettos, transports, mass shootings, escapes, hiding, death, and survival. Showing victims and perpetrators together in the same space will help bridge a persistent gap in Holocaust scholarship between studies of those who committed genocide and their targets. To do this, we will use methods from corpus linguistics and natural language processing to tag words and phrases in survivor testimony transcripts related to place, space, and movement. Place names are key, but so are words like home, train, barracks, inside, outside, alone, somewhere, near, and room. Our preliminary analysis has shown, among other things, that space and time are related in interesting ways in testimony. Crucial moments in a survivor story often take place in just a few minutes, a moment, but they can take a long time to tell, as this graphic shows. These pivotal moments happen in small, even intimate spaces. So as the time of telling expands, place contracts, and descriptions become more precise and revealing of spatial characteristics. We hope to develop ways to identify this accordioning of time and space automatically through verbal cues so that we can search hundreds or thousands of testimonies with for these moments. We also are using corpus methods to compare testimonies, looking for words that may be more or less familiar than expected, like here, in his office and on a table, an unexpectedly intimate experience of violence. Thank you.
All right, thank you. My name is Ed Lazzarini. I'm a historian of Central Eurasia and the Russian Empire at Indiana University. This is my project. I'll have to come over here to see it because it's stretched out a long way. The Central Eurasian Muslim Population Project, CEMP, the historical demography and population behavior among Muslims in the Russian Empire between 1828 and 1918. I'm starting as a third part one. This is phase one that we're actually working on now with NEH support, and it will do a study of the demographic scene of Kazan City, which I'll identify in a moment. The purpose of this project is to create over time a massive relational database of longitudinal vital statistics and social information gathered from the so-called metrical books. These are previously unused parish registers, not just for Muslims, but for all of the major confessions that had practitioners within the Russian Empire, compiled by the subjects, for the subjects of the empire between these 2 years, 1828 and 1918. Funding from NEH will support the first phase of the project, whereby we will create the program the database to store non-aggregated data on persons, families, and households. And seeking proof of concept for the project, we are in the midst of gathering data for approximately 25,000 Muslim inhabitants of Kazan, the third largest city in the empire, as organized around 18 mosques and their parishes. So we can see, in the black is the Russian Empire. The yellow insert is, in fact, the total area that I would hope to study over the next, 5 to 10 years. Extracting data for probably up to 3 million individuals. But we're beginning with that sort of dark splotch in the middle, the yellow, which is Kazan province. And up near the top of that province is Kazan city. And I should also mention that this other city noted as Orenburg, it's the site where all Muslims were administered by a special institution that had been created by the 18th century monarch, Catherine the Great. Complex statistical analysis of the data in conjunction with narrative sources will open up unique opportunities for rewriting the social history of the Russian Empire at the end of its history. Along the way, we will produce provincial micro-studies, beginning with Kazan province. Yeah, and then move on to the other provinces as well. I just want to show you this. This is a page from the metrical book. It's an Arabic script, Old Tatar language. And lastly, this gives you a sort of a template for one of the pages that this is for marriages, I believe. No, divorce records, and gives you the kind of information that is gathered from it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pramit Chowdhury. I'm an associate professor of classics at the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm co-director of the Quantitative Criticism Lab.
And I'm Joseph Dexter. I'm a PhD candidate in systems biology at Harvard University and the other co-director of QCL. QCL was founded in 2014 by a team of humanists and scientists with the goal of integrating biological and quantitative approaches into the study of literature.
This NEH-funded grant has three principal areas of focus: intertextuality, reception, and machine learning-aided stylometry.
So this first figure here shows categories of literary resemblances separated by two key parameters: the scope of the relationship and the degree of similarity between the texts in question.
We're going to look at two approaches to literature today inspired by biological methods that address the left and the right-hand side of this figure, respectively.
So the first technique is called sequence alignment. This is a method that's routinely used in biology to identify genes that are similar but not exact in sequence. And you can see on the top left of the slide a sample sequence alignment for one gene across 6 different organisms.
Sequence alignment can be applied to natural language characters and is an effective means of identifying verbal similarities that are inexact and hence would be difficult to identify using conventional tools. The figure on the bottom right illustrates some phrases in Latin texts that were found using our tool Phylum that are non-identical but are related and of significant interest to literary critics.
Phylogenetic profiles provide concise representations of the evolutionary histories of sets of genes and are particularly powerful in bioinformatics for identifying instances of coevolution. We are developing phylogenetic profiles of literary reception histories in which texts substitute for organisms and literary characters substitute for genes.
The figure here illustrates the application of that technique to a particular classical play. It shows, in particular, the presence or absence of characters tracked across various chronological adaptations over 2,000 years.
So just to finish on a personal note, our collaboration dates back to 2009 when I, as a high school student, enrolled in a seminar on Virgil that Pramit was teaching.
And 7 years later, we're here as equal partners in presenting this project to you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm Julia Flanders, and I'm the director of the Digital Scholarship Group at the Northeastern University Library. Tapas Classroom is a new initiative of Tapas, the TEI archiving, publishing, and access service hosted at the Northeastern University Library and funded by the NEH and the IMLS and the Text Encoding Initiative Consortium. Tapas provides for long-term repository-based archiving and publishing of TEI data in ways that support the distinctive challenges of richly encoded marked up text and also enable a holistic view of a growing corpus of TEI data to support the study of text encoding as a humanities and digital humanities technology. With Tapas Classroom, we're adding new features to support teaching with TEI. expanding the ways that you can display and read TEI data to include both distant and distinctively close-up approaches to reading TEI data and ways of revealing patterns within it. Enabling sharing of assignments, syllabi, and other course materials so that the community of TEI teachers can learn from each other's examples and share materials. To build a community for those teaching with TEI, to share ideas and to develop collaborative courses, and to make the Tapas architecture more extensible so that over time we can welcome additional viewing options that may be contributed by users, and so that we can scale up the system more extensively. Tapas has at its heart, next slide, a Fedora Hydra repository system and is built on open source components. It includes XML search and processing, which is handled by an XML database, and it has display logic and querying using XSLT and XQuery. We welcome and invite participation from anyone interested in TEI pedagogy, and in particular, we welcome people to join in our forum discussions, to contribute to the design process, and we're particularly eager for beta testers who might approach this in an adventurous spirit and contribute their ideas as to how Tapas can better support teaching with TEI. Please, I hope you will prod any colleagues who might be interested in contributing, and we look forward to your input. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is James Malazita. My co-PI, Dean Newsma, and I are both members of the Science and Technology Studies faculty at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York, which is an engineering institute. And being part of an engineering institute means that while for many digital humanities scholars, digital humanities means bringing digital tools to the humanities, in our context, it means bringing humanistic tools to STEM and design spaces in transformative ways, which hopefully can reflexively transform the humanities themselves as well. Dean and I each co-direct something called the Programs in Design and Innovation at STS, which is a studio-based design program run and administered entirely by our interpretive social science department. And as far as we know, it's the only program of its type in the world. This NEH project funds the use and incorporation of 3D printing technologies and inquiry into our design platform. So what does it mean to do critical humanistic work through 3D printing and in STEM and design spaces? So what our project does is it uses critical, both in terms of meta-criticism, so asking how is the world and in what ways and what forms could the world be otherwise, as well as using critical theory with a capital C to reference theories like the Frankfurt School, hermeneutics of suspicion, feminist and post-colonial scholars and literature to inform scientific design practices and logics. The 4 ways that we're using critical theory in our design practice is one, through the use of critical design, which as opposed to affirmative design, actually builds in power and logic into products that both expose power imbalances as well as try to correct those power imbalances. So think of this as opposite design as something like anti-homeless spikes that we see everywhere in building facades in Washington, D.C., right? So something that actively combats those power imbalances. Also in terms of the design process itself as part of the technosocial system of designed artifacts. So we do collaborative CAD work. So normally when we think of CAD and computer-aided design and drafting, we think of it as one step in the design process that you hand off to an expert, but there's actually a lot of embedded design decisions that happen in the creation of CAD modeling. So what would it mean to, one, have a system where multiple people can do 3D modeling together, that exposes not only the ways in which multiple people use the same tools in very different ways according to their own positionalities and standpoints, but also how the embedded logics of software packages subtly influence design decisions that are made. We're also using 3D printing to explore material agencies. So one common theme in STS is that there is no translation that does not impart transformation. So how do material logics recreate and transform our design concepts, and also using design process as humanistic inquiry. So in the design process, we think of problem identification as the first step, but if you're doing design and humanistic design well, you realize that, of course, the problem is always more complicated than you actually think it is. And part of this was using a workshop where we invited engineers and humanities scholars to build a humanistic flower pot, and I'm happy to talk about that afterwards. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Joseph Koivisto with the University of Maryland Libraries.
And I'm Lila Copar from the Catholic University of America. Project Anvari is an initiative to develop an aggregation portal for collections of early medieval art and artifacts from the northern peripheries of Europe. Our project team is developing a tool that will support novel digital research on a scale previously unattainable in our field. And the project also seeks to promote collaborative research in an interdisciplinary fashion among students, scholars, and the general public. Our core project team consists of scholars and information technologists based at 4 different universities in the US, and we are working in conjunction with an international advisory board of researchers, museum specialists, and institutional stakeholders.
The basic concept for the architecture of the system, as you can see here, is to create a database-driven web portal that will provide aggregated data from third-party contributors. For the pilot, our data will be contributed by the British Museum, the Swedish National Heritage Board, and the Norwich Castle Museum. By migrating data in an RDF format into our platform-specific metadata scheme, we will present uniform metadata records enhanced by the project's SCOS-encoded iconographic thesaurus. Our project is also seeking out partnerships with other initiatives, such as the Period O project, which you may have heard of, in order to integrate more linked authorities as a means of establishing Andvari as a part of the ever-growing network of linked open data resources. A Postgres database will drive our public-facing portal, managed through a Drupal instance, which will be accessible the world over. Proposed user authentication functionality will also allow for credentialed users to contribute data to our metadata records, as well as concepts and connections to our authority records.
Our project plan is as follows. The first phase of the project, the first stage of the project was completed under Level 1 NEH ODH grant. During that period, we held 2 international workshops and developed the conceptual design and technical requirements of the portal, as well as the initial draft of an iconographic thesaurus.
In Stage 2, supported by an ODH Level 2 startup grant, the project team will dedicate the 18-month grant period to the development and testing of a functional pilot platform for the Andvari portal. This pilot platform will present a stable system architecture and data model that will support ongoing integration of harvested third-party data, a public web interface to allow navigation, searching, and semantic browsing, and links to external data sources. In addition, the continued refinement of the iconographic thesaurus will support the description of iconographic content and enhance research through novel intellectual access to aggregate collections. Lastly, based on the success of Stage 2, we will release the platform for general usage in the future. And if you want any further information, please feel free to check out our project website, our blog, and our Twitter feed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diana Psyche, and I'm from Ball State University, and I'm completing this project with Val Burke, who is over here, first row on your right. We are working with several people on this who sort of represent the audience of our sort of pilot. We are working with a costume designer, a World War II historian, a local museum curator of a textiles museum, and a librarian and a programmer. And the project is 3D modeling for textile collections. This project has several goals. The first is we'll research using photogrammetry to assess historic clothing artifacts. Thus far, a known use of making 3D imagery with photogrammetry in the apparel industry has been to take photographs of an actual person or a dress form and then use the resulting measurements to make clothing that fits. And for this project, what we aim to do is to digitize with the related measurements the clothing or the historic clothing. And several research questions about photogrammetry will be explored, such as how can photogrammetry be used to display clothing artifacts online. The project will also include exploring appropriate terminology for describing garments and their component parts. For example, a set and sleeve can be called set in the round or high cap. And so we'll be exploring appropriate terminology for online communication and searchability. And then our third goal is to digitize and contextualize a series of garments relative to the history of fashion. And we'll be using the Beeman Historic Costume Collection, which is a collection in the Midwest, and it relays styles, trends, and influential designers of each decade. And the result will be a pilot of a web-based application or website with the 15 garments that will be used for both research and teaching.
Do I get her extra seconds? In 2008, I went to retrieve a book from the microfilm repository. Somewhat traumatized from my previous experiences with microfilm research, I grumbled down to the basement to find the film and reel my way to the 60 or 70 pages I would copy page by page. The librarian smiled widely when she told me that the early English books, EEBO microfilm collection that I wanted, was available online. I marveled at my good fortune in being able to conduct serious scholarly research while sitting in the comfort of my underwear. More importantly, though, the EEBO collection had just been made text searchable. In an instant, with a simple query, I could find important texts which earlier scholars would have toiled months or even years to discover. Even so, my background in computer programming and database design told me that we could make far more interesting analyses by using a big data approach to these texts. Although a variety of digital textual analysis, that's DTA, tools are available today, they are complicated and difficult to use. They are tailored for specific, narrow research interests. Humanities researchers will benefit greatly from a framework that accommodates a wide variety of queries and includes a broad spectrum of statistical techniques. Our goal is to create a DTA framework which requires no programming, no training, is easy to use, and produces replicable results. Rice University is hosting an international workshop of digitally savvy humanities scholars to determine how to build this simple and robust DTA framework. Our workshop has 3 main goals. 1, to consider the most simple and intuitive user interfaces. 2, to define a spectrum of the kinds of questions scholars from different humanities disciplines might like to ask of a corpus, and 3, to identify the best, most effective ways to display or visualize the answers to these questions. Upon these pillars, we plan to build a DTA framework that is so simple and easy to use that practically anyone can take a fishing expedition through a corpus. EEBO is an excellent initial data set for this project since it is discrete, free from copyright restrictions, and of significant interest to linguists and historians. Although our initial focus is on EEBO, the effective and simple user interface and visualization techniques that we develop for this framework will be available for other corpora, ultimately changing the way that scholars look at texts.
Hi, I'm Daniel Rosenberg from the University of Oregon. What does history look like? Can you hear me? You can't hear me. How's this? What does history look like? How do you draw time? For more than 2 centuries, a typical answer to these questions has been the linear graph that we refer to as a timeline, which is a feature probably of most of the projects presented today. Invented in the middle of the 18th century, the measured linear timeline expresses a great deal about modern views of history, progress, causality, and quantification. In the 18th century, the new timeline format served as the foundation for a range of important infographic innovations, including, for example, the line graph, which debuted about 20 years later. Our project, Time Online, is a digital archaeology of the timeline. Our goal is to explore the reciprocal implications of digital technology for the history of information design and the history of information design for contemporary digital work. We seek to do this by telling stories of early infographics in a visually rich, interactive environment, exploring time before the timeline, the emergence of linear graphics in history, and various alternative graphic formats that design history has to offer. By studying how to translate a variety of artifacts designed for the paper world into the world of pixels, we are trying to learn how medium, design, and epistemology interact. During the past few years, we've experimented a good deal around these questions. We are currently at work on 3 alpha modules, each exploring one old paper artifact by reverse engineering it for the web, and by examining the opportunities and the limitations of paper and pixels in relation to one another. These first 3 modules are the fan-shaped 1885 concentric chart of history, a chronology game from 1892 entitled Mark Twain's Memory Builder, an 1850 pedagogical tool for grid and paintbrush called the Polish-American System of Chronology. Our next step, supported by the NEH, is to explore where we might go with actual technical and research infrastructure in place. We will be returning to our first trials to perfect them and sketching out 6 new modules to complete a trilogy of trilogies, covering 3 centuries of infographic history, 9 paper artifacts reverse engineered for a digital environment.
Hello, my name is Ty Pierce. I manage Education and Multimedia Services at the Ohio History Connection, formerly the Ohio Historical Society. We are a multi-armed organization. We have the State Archive, we have the State Museum, we have the State Historic Preservation Office, but we also co-manage a network of over 50 historic sites and museums around the state as well. And so our project, Tour Sites for WordPress, was truly born of necessity. When I started 4 years ago, one of the first things I started looking at was how do we provide web mobile experiences for our main museum, for any of the sites? How do we give that to our visitors and enable them to do that? And that's been a very long road. Kind of looking at what resources we had early on, I've always been a big fan of the mantra, good, fast, cheap, pick any 2. So we were looking for something that was free or very nearly free, something that had a exceptional ease of use, and that's both on the back end from content development, that the database would be something that was extensible and sustainable, but then also the user experience, obviously, and then something that was robust and could really do a lot of content, because when you have over 50 historic sites, and depending on which number you hear, 1.6 to 1.9 million objects in our permanent collection, we have a lot of stuff that could be used in something like this. And so we were actually a partner on a previous NEH grant with the Center for Public History plus Digital Humanities at Cleveland State, who developed the Curate Escape platform, which runs on Omeka. And we were partnered with them to basically bring that, which was built around exterior tours, landscape architecture tours, and bring it into a museum setting. If anybody ever gets to visit our state museum here in Columbus, Ohio, it is a very strange building with a very strange layout, and so it was a nice opportunity to see how those things could break. So we decided to create this platform because we didn't have a way to do that across a 50-site network without having either 50 separate installs of Omeka or having this enormous amount of content that would be very, very tough to manage. So Omeka didn't do that, but we realized WordPress networks do that. They allow you to put in these tiers of users, so we could have local site managers possibly trained on building their own tours, whereas we could help create tours for any of them and have kind of that dual level. So we've produced 3 tours where we selected 3 sites: the John Rankin House, which is an Underground Railroad site, Harriet Beecher Stowe House in Cincinnati, and Fort Ancient, which is an outdoor tour. They are multimedia focused, and we're drawing on existing sites. Our first test is tomorrow, actually, at Rankin, and we're going to be evaluating that, refining the platform, refining some of the content, and then putting this out as an open source set of plugins for WordPress so that any organization can grab these and start using them. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Doug Grieside. I'm the curator of theater at New York Public Library for the Performing Arts, and
this is Greg Lord. I'm at Hamilton College as a designer and software engineer.
Great. So I don't know if you know, but about 41 years ago on Broadway, the first computerized lighting design was used in the musical A Chorus Line, designed by a lady named Theron Musser, who also designed Follies and a bunch of other shows. At the Library for the Performing Arts, we have her papers, and about 10 years ago now, another lighting designer who designed the play version, the stage version of Amadeus, which was later turned into the movie, obviously, worked together with librarians and archivists to create the theater lighting database, which is essentially these 4 shows with all of the lighting documents scanned and made freely available online. The problem is that if you aren't a lighting designer, it's almost impossible to try to make sense of what these documents are. There's sketches and numbers and things that look kind of like proto spreadsheets, but it's really hard to figure out what you're looking at. And even in video, up until very recently, it was very hard to capture what lighting design looked like on VHS or on tape. And so our project is an attempt to try to figure out if there's a way of using computerized or computer gaming systems to emulate lighting design. We're beginning our work with a program called Capture, which is a Swedish-based design program. This is Sunday in the Park with George, simulated from our archival documents, Richard Nelson's lighting designs. But so this is again a commercial program. We're hoping to use this and begin to try to think about what are the things that this program does and other programs that allow designers to work today create, and then tie them to archival documents so that we can create similar simulations of older shows. This is a quick prototype that Greg put together that I'll let him talk about if you would like. It's in a gaming platform called Unity.
As Doug mentioned, one of the aspects of this project is seeing about making these kinds of visualizations interactive in real time, where people can step through these scenes and see this lighting data recreated as individual lights, as cues, as sequences. And to do that, we're actually bringing software approaches from the gaming industry to bear. This is something we're trying to do within the browser using the recently supported WebGL JavaScript framework for 3D directly in the web browser. And to do that, we're borrowing both the tools and the software approaches of game design, such as the Unity platform. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Shanahan. I'm from the English department at DePaul University in Chicago, and it's my pleasure to present very briefly an overview of the Reading Chicago Reading Project. This is a group effort, and I want to first give special acknowledgement to my co-PIs, Robin Burke in Computer Science, Megan Bernal from the DePaul Library, Tony Sarasso from the Department of Writing, Rhetoric, and Discourse. Thanks are due also to DePaul's Social Science Research Center and several graduate students, and you can find all these people on our project blog. Also indebted to the willingness of Chicago Public Library staff, especially the One Book, One Chicago coordinator, Jennifer Lezak, the Assistant Chief of Technology, Content and Innovation, Andrew Medler, and the visionary CPL Commissioner, Brian Bannon. They work with us on data sharing and archival access. This is all very important and complicated work. And above all, we've been able to push forward with new speed and intellectual leverage because of the Level 2 startup grant from the NEH Office of Digital Humanities, thank you very much, and awards of cloud computing services from Microsoft Azure. So Reading Chicago Reading brings together faculty in computing, literature, new media, and sociology with university and public librarians to study a popular and much imitated One Book, One Chicago program operated by the Chicago Public Library since fall of 2001. For the past decade, DePaul University has participated in implementation of this program in a variety of ways, from associated undergraduate courses to hosting book discussion events on campus. But it became clear to us over the years that this One Book program acts as a kind of repeating natural experiment. Each chosen work represents a data probe into library usage, city scale, and by extension a window onto the elective reading behavior of the library patrons of a major American city. Our hypothesis is that text characteristics, library branch demographics, and CPL promotional activities, including CPL social media, are variables that can be tied to circulation data and used to predict patron response of future One Book titles. Our primary task is to discover the relationship between these variables and encode them in predictive models. When future books roll out, in other words, we know the book titles ahead of time, and we can make predictive models of how they fan out over the city. So our project joins a number of data-driven initiatives in Chicago, courtesy of Chicago's open access data portal. We believe that our project's digital humanities innovation is its integration of multiple different types of data, ultimately on the way to predictive modeling of cultural events. So here's our 5 kinds. For One Book choices since 2011, the data does not go further back at this point. All of the citywide circulation numbers, we have anonymized checkouts for every branch, that's over 80, print and electronic. Second, the demographics of neighborhoods surrounding each library branch, textual features data, historical records, and social media. At this point, Twitter, but more recently, Facebook and Library Thing. This is just one example of the kinds of things we're trying to do. This is from principal component analysis, the 80 branches arranged in different groupings according to the 5 most recent books for checkout patterns. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Danny Kane, along with Mary Emma Graham. We are co-PIs of the Black Book Interactive Project, which falls under the umbrella of the University of Kansas's Project on the History of Black Writing. And Black Book Interactive Project is part of an initiative at HBW that aims to correct an imbalance in literary study in the digital humanities. In recent years, there has been both an increase in the number of literary texts available for digital humanities study, as well as rediscovery and archiving of Black authored texts. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of crossover between that and the vast number of literary texts that are currently available for digital humanities studies are white authored. So the Black Book Interactive Project is one way we are trying to correct the imbalance and diversify the literary texts that are available for digital humanities study. The project, the specific way we're going to do that is to create metadata schema that accounts for race that is interoperable with current metadata schemas like MODS and MADS. So we will generate the new schema and apply it to approximately 75 novels from our archive, our collection, which is currently being digitized. This will both enhance access to little-known African-American authored texts and also serve as a demonstration project for scholarly networks that focus on research in African-American literature. So again, we're working to create access, helping to close the digital divide with Black authored texts in the digital humanities, and work within existing systems to enable literary study in the digital humanities. This is a project that is defined by its partnership. We're working with the Chicago Text Lab to digitize our collections. We're working with Howard University's English department here and the libraries at KU along with the HBW archive. This is all part of a larger initiative to digitize African American literature, bridge the gap between invisible archives and digital scholarship. So HBW is one of several archives that has extensive collections, but they're not really linked up with people doing research in the digital humanities. So to create this metadata schema is one way to make those invisible archives into visible archives that are usable, searchable, and ready for study in the digital humanities. And in doing this, we hope to become an example for other projects to also enable better access with the digital humanities. Thank you.
Great. Hi, I'm Rebecca Beneville. I am an associate professor of classics at Washington and Lee, representing the Ancient Graffiti Project here. In our lives, writing is a given. It's omnipresent, and it's as ephemeral or permanent as we choose. This was not the case in antiquity, from which the preservation of personal, handwritten texts is exceedingly rare. The glimpses that we do have are fascinating. So we have papyri from Egypt, we have wooden tablets from Britain, and we have handwritten messages found on the walls of Pompeii and Herculaneum, two cities destroyed in the year 79. Their unique preservation has yielded several thousand of these writings, including, as you see on the top right-hand corner, this prayer to Venus. With the Ancient Graffiti Project, we aim to present and publish these first-century writings in a 21st-century digital platform. At present, if you want to study this prayer or anything like it, you head to a university research library and you can find TypeScript. But as you see below, even having an illustration of the inscription makes clear that ancient graffiti are something entirely different from what might initially come to mind. Ancient examples are small, they're discrete, and they're carefully written. So each of these blocks is 1 centimeter. They're also inscribed on a fragile surface that's easily susceptible to damage. This one was uncovered just a few decades ago, and you can see it's already chipping away, the plaster just flaking off the wall. And this is the harsh reality when material is open and exposed to the elements, even at a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Our project, therefore, began fieldwork in 2014 to record and document the handwritten messages that are still extant. With our startup grant, we're now creating the platform to access these artifacts, and we're developing a series of digital tools for study and analysis of these writings and the places where they were inscribed. So we're creating copyright-free maps to visualize where graffiti were written, and we're working to design multi-scalar geospatial visualizations to make searching the full extent of the ancient city more feasible. We're also creating a framework that can be replicable for other ancient sites, since graffiti have been found across the ancient world from Smyrna to Lausanne. Preservation of sites elsewhere does not compare to that at Pompeii and Herculaneum, and so excavators might run across a handful of writing among the ruins of a building or town in another site. This has led excavators in the past to ignore ancient graffiti, misinterpreting them, or simply not knowing what to do with them. By providing a set of graffiti-specific metadata and a series of controlled vocabularies, we offer a framework that can be replicated and applied at other sites, a model for the documentation of this special type of cultural heritage. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Breyer. I'm a faculty member at the City University of New York's Graduate Center and the project director of Beyond Citation, which my colleague Eileen Clancy, who is both my student and collaborator and serves as the project coordinator, conceived several years ago and was able to then workshop the project and work with a group of fellow students to beta test it in a class that Matthew Gold, my colleague who's here in the audience, and I taught in digital praxis at the Graduate Center. So this is actually the second project that we've developed out of digital praxis that has gotten an NEH startup grant that we're quite proud about. So let me give it to Eileen.
Hi, everybody.
Beyond Citation is an internet platform to help scholars understand research databases. When I say research databases, I mean everything from JSTOR to Google Books to historical newspaper databases, whether they require institutional subscriptions or whether they are freely accessible. While the use of databases such as ProQuest historical newspapers or Gale's 19th century collections online is common, these tools have largely escaped critique by traditional humanities scholars. So despite the ubiquity of databases, academics are often unaware of the constraints that databases place on their research. Scholars and even specialized librarians have almost no ability to look into the structures and contents of the database they're using because of their proprietary nature. Their algorithms and mechanisms are opaque, and the limited description information available about digital collections is scattered and inaccessible. As a result, scholars are often unable to account for parameters information included in the databases they're working in or the collection strength, biases, errors, and omissions. Beyond Citation will gather and centralize information about digital resources. To construct understanding of how they work, we think it's necessary for researchers to work collaboratively because of the non-transparent nature of these digital tools. We think a key role for Beyond Citation will be to encourage conversations about databases among scholars. We'd like Beyond Citation to be the missing manual for research databases for novice and advanced researchers alike. Just as learning history is not simply a matter of memorizing dates, learning to critically analyze digital documents and artifacts is not simply a matter of searching databases at the library. But what specific problems are we concerned with? Well, it's often impossible to get a list of items in collections. Sometimes publishers themselves don't know. And because many academics don't understand how databases work, they can't correctly evaluate their own research methodology. As library scholar Marlene Manoff says, the database experience increasingly determines the nature of our connection to knowledge and history, yet commercial companies now own huge portions of these records. What should researchers understand about databases? Beyond Citation will provide information about search, content, provenance, legibility, and errors. Clicking on these tabs leads to information about each of these areas. And we are most of our attention and a lot of the money that we're getting from this NEH grant is actually going to kind of the social and cultural problems of getting people to think about and look at these things. And so we're going to actually spend a bunch of money on UX, which is not that common for DH projects.
Okay. Have you ever been so intrigued by the past or so enraptured by a work of art that you had to know as much as possible about its context? Doing my PhD about 10 years ago, I'd become captivated by an obscure 17th century writer, and I needed to know more. Turns out his books included prefatory poems by his friends, sort of like 17th century book blurbs or writing on a friend's Facebook wall. His friends had often published their own books, often with little poems by each other and by other friends. By looking at these little poems and dedications, I got a general sense of this network and the things they valued. Now, humanists have been doing this kind of work for centuries, but here's a dirty secret. Keeping track of all the relationships is almost impossible. I mostly remembered my writer's friends, but I had a hard time remembering which of his friends were friends with one another. To keep track of the network, I drew lines between names on sheets of paper. But what if digital technology offered a better way to compile, represent, and study relationships? Fast forward 10 years. With thanks to funding from Google and the Council for Library and Information Resources, and the labors of fellow scholars Daniel Shore, Jessica Otis, Scott Weingart, and many others, 6 Degrees of Francis Bacon is now a digital reconstruction of the early modern British social network that people from all over the world can collaboratively expand and revise. The project harnesses digitized texts, natural language processing, network inference methods, and distributed historical expertise to create the broadest, most accessible source of who knew whom in the era of Shakespeare, Newton, Roger Williams, and John Locke. Today, with a few clicks, a scholar can add a new relationship and see it approved and integrated into the current state of knowledge. The beta version of our website, created collaboratively with undergraduate programmers, has received nearly 30,000 hits since going live in September 2015 and is growing daily through the contributions of scholars, students, and citizen humanists. For 6 Degrees to remain an indispensable resource for scholars and students over the long term, we have 5 priorities under this NEH grant: enriching our data, improving user experience, further integrating our project with other digital resources, identifying a library or other institution willing to take over the challenge of long-term preservation, and ultimately, packaging and distributing our code so that scholars can create similar networks for different eras and regions. In short, we aim to transform 6 Degrees into an accessible, sustainable, and vital resource that will continue to grow and serve the scholarly community for the very long term. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Mark Newton. I'm here today from the Columbia University Libraries on behalf of the Humanities Core project team and its directors, Kathleen Fitzpatrick from the Modern Language Association and Barbara Rockenbach of the Columbia University Libraries. CORE is the Commons Open Repository Exchange. It's a collaboration between different types of institutions working to bring best practices in open access digital research repository development to a scholarly community that is organized along disciplinary affinities and not institutional affiliations. CORE is built as a connector to the WordPress-based social network, scholarly social network, MLA Commons. The infrastructure itself is built on the Fedora Commons repository infrastructure and an Apache Solr index, bringing open access and digital humanities infrastructure to humanities scholars and the full range of their digital works. Content deposited into CORE by Commons members is free to browse and access online. It's well described and citable through the use of digital object identifiers. CORE launched at the close of our pilot program in 2015 and includes now hundreds of deposits in a wide variety of formats. In our next implementation phase, there are 2 broad categories of activity. The first is expansion, as the Commons model is itself expanding, bringing on additional societies beyond the MLA. We expect to learn much more about some of the robust features that will need to be included in CORE, including improved feedback mechanisms for contributors to understand the use of their content on the CORE, providing more contextual information and enhanced metadata for users of CORE content, tighter integration with some of the social features of the Commons, and additional connection to interoperable repository programs like SHARE. And the second core area of activity is under assessment. We plan to have a robust assessment activity in which we will be working directly with users to understand their experiences on the Commons, but also with users of, with the core, I should say, and with users of core content to understand sort of the success of our program there as well. We also plan to undertake a robust sustainability activity that includes an environmental scan, particularly with a view to evolving and advancing initiatives that will be occurring over the course of the grant in order for the Commons and the core to honor the core tenets of access and preservation of deposited content beyond the implementation period. And it will all be done in conjunction with our project team and our advisory board. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dan Johnson, a librarian at Notre Dame, representing Textual Geographies Project on behalf of our director, Matthew Wilkins. In recent years, unprecedented amounts of textual data have tantalized us. Millions of digitized books promise to tell new stories about societal and cultural change and help us also better understand the individual stories we thought we already knew. But how do we marshal these data? Disciplinary, legal, and technical challenges have been daunting, to say the least. Textual Geographies plots a bold course forward in Big Data DH by mining text for location information and then associating additional geographic data with it. This is a rich field of analysis. Location study at scale has not been done in the humanities, yet everyone seems to have a stake in the game. Our partial list of participants includes humanities scholars, librarians, computer scientists, geographers, and they come from institutions at home and abroad. There's a big buy-in. But where does one start? Textual Geographies has established a partnership with a natural ally, the HathiTrust Research Center. The HTRC hosts a gigantic collection of digitized texts that makes our work possible. In short, you can see some of the relevant vital stats to date. And we, in turn, upload geographic metadata back to the HTRC, enriching their records. This relationship is only becoming sweeter as legal challenges to text mining in copyright materials has been dropping away. We think Textual Geographies will be one of the first major projects that mines the vast ocean of 20th and 21st century books that have previously been off limits. The key challenges that remain, then, are exciting matters of creative computation and imaginative application. To help patrons of all kinds, Textual Geographies implements an easy-to-use interface, like Google Mgrams for places, but better. Patrons can select the entire HathiTrust corpus or a subset, like crime fiction or economic books, and then generate place-related visualizations. Yes, maps, but also non-cartographic visualizations like graphs and charts. Perhaps even integrate into the NEH-funded Bookworm project. There's a lot on offer right out of the box. The power user is equally important, however. We anticipate projects whose parameters we can't even imagine yet. Tracking the density of location mentions across time is one thing, but perhaps use of place and texts will indicate other suggestive signals like author gender. Who knows? Possibilities, however, are manifold. Therefore, data sets will be freely available for download, reuse, and manipulation, however users see fit. Challenges remain. How do you separate Charlotte the character from Charlotte the city? Is a place a location, a metaphor, something in between? One could go on. But the opportunity to solve these challenges and invite participation along the way has never been better. Let's do lots of machine learning and tell new stories. Thank you.
Does it just go to my slides? Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Yep. Thank you. Hi, I'm Jane Landers. Oops, too short. Jane Landers from Vanderbilt University. I'm the director of the ESSS, or ES to the fourth digital archive. It was launched in 2002 with an NEH collaborative research grant, and it's hosted at Vanderbilt University. The first NEH grant funded us, and we've been doing guerrilla preservation ever since, we call it. In Cuba and Brazil we started, and then additional grants have taken us also to Colombia, a variety of sites in Colombia, and we've also done Spanish Florida, and those represent the oldest records in the nation, and we're looking for African history in those records. So it's teams of historians trained in language and paleography of particularly Spanish and Portuguese, IT specialists, bibliographers, and archivists, and we've worked creatively and collaboratively now for over a decade so that we now have about 600,000 unique images in this archive dating from the 16th to the 19th century. They preserve approximately the history of between 4 and 6 million individuals of African descent. So we protect imperiled cultural heritage, and we also make it possible to do new research on these understudied and historically neglected populations in the Americas. We democratize knowledge by making these materials from these remote and often difficult locales accessible to the global public who would be unable to access them otherwise. Our teams have also built a network of digital humanities scholars who work on slavery in the Americas, and they draw on our collections for their own projects. So scholars are now producing conferences, dissertations, journal publications, and monographs using our data. And the most recently, we've been also putting together conferences to try to pull some of these people together, get on the same page, so to speak. So we're preserving rapidly disappearing documents as we stand here. Our infrastructure is no longer able to handle it all. We have a massive amount of documents now and images, so this grant will support the migration of all that material to an open source SOBEX system to promote our sharing that we're hoping to do, and also to standardize a lot of what we've done already. So at the end of the grant period, we're going to have another conference and pull together a number of these other humanities scholars working on slavery. We hope to share all of our information, and we also have made it a point in all the places we go to train minority students in all those locations to preserve their own records. We leave the materials behind for them to continue to work after they've given what we need to our project. So, thank you.
Okay, great. Hi there, I'm Sandra Shepard. I'm the director and executive producer of Children's and Educational Media at WNET, which is the New York public media station. I want to thank the NEH for its commitment to Mission US. It is our series of free role-playing games that is intended to really engage young people in U.S. history. And we're really appreciative of ODH's support to help us revitalize and expand our content through critical upgrades. Now, what is Mission US? Well, we've used popular gaming conventions to give young people, primarily in grades 5 through high school, the chance to virtually experience pivotal events in history. So players assume the roles of young people from the past. They navigate very rich interactive environments. They meet historic figures. They grapple with multiple perspectives, and they see the consequences of the choices that they make. We have broad educational goals, first and foremost to engage all learners, certainly to increase their historical interest, empathy, and knowledge, and also to focus. Oh, so sorry, I'm on somebody else's project. And also to focus on the important role of ordinary men and women in history. We have more than 1.6 million registered users, including 60,000 teachers in all 50 states, and we continue to grow annually. Now, our project started almost a decade ago when WNET joined forces with Electric Fun Stuff, a digital design company, historians from the American Social History Project at CUNY's Center for Media and Learning, and researchers from Educational Development Center, and our goal was really to combat low history proficiency. As you can see to date, we've covered a number of topics from the American Revolution to the Great Depression. We have 2 more in development, one on Japanese incarceration during World War II and another on the Civil Rights Movement. But unless we rebuild the games, the first games we produced, they will become unplayable. So with this grant, this NEH grant, we will rebuild our first mission for Crown or Colony, which launched in 2010. So what happens in our first mission? Well, players take on the role of Nat Wheeler, a young printer's apprentice in 1770 Boston, encountering a range of perspectives on the budding patriot movement. And ultimately, they witness the Boston Massacre and must choose where their allegiances lie. Now, in extensive evaluation, students using for Crown and Colony outperformed other students on tests. So, we have a lot to do with this grant. We're going to rebuild the game using a Unity engine, deepen humanities content, expand our reach by adding literacy supports, create a roadmap for rebuilding other games, and share lessons learned. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Gould from the CUNY Graduate Center. I want to thank the Office of Digital Humanities for funding this project, Learning in the Public Square. The project argues that the work of the humanities happens in humanities classrooms, where faculty and students grapple with new text and classic text, discuss interpretation and meaning, and explore connections between ancient eras and the present day. However, classrooms all too often are cloistered and closed off from the public and miss out on possible connections that could be made by students across classes and to the larger public. So this project aims to create a platform that will help turn the classroom and institutions sort of inside out by connecting classrooms across institutions, increasing the visibility of humanities work, and addressing issues of disconnection that students can feel often at urban commuter colleges and community colleges. Together, we hope that the platform will help colleges knit together their larger intellectual fabrics. Now, technical solutions like a new platform aren't the entire solution to these problems, but they can help. At CUNY, we've been lucky enough to have built several platforms, the CUNY Academic Commons, which is used to connect the 24-campus City University of New York system. There, we've got a development team that has been making active contributions to larger projects, WordPress and BuddyPress, with code that has been used and reused millions of times across those projects. We created, through a grant through the Sloan Foundation, Commons in a Box, which is an abstracted form of the CUNY Academic Commons and enables any institution to quickly and easily create its own Commons platform. This platform is used by the MLA for the MLA Commons and also used by Project Muse, DH Regional communities, SUNY Geneseo, and many other colleges and nonprofits. For this grant, we're partnering with the City Tech Open Lab, which was founded in 2011 through a U.S. Department of Education grant for strengthening Hispanic-serving institutions. That grant project really attempted to address those issues of isolation that students could feel at their institutions to strengthen their ties to the college and to each other, and thereby increase retention. This Open Lab site creates connections across courses, projects, clubs, and portfolios for students and engages collaborative work in the humanities. So together with these two projects, we are going to be building a new version of CBOX that just from the start will be built as a teaching platform. We hope that doing this will be able to add a suite of teaching center digital tools, many of them sponsored previously by the Office of Digital Humanities, that will make classes more accessible, and we'll also be partnering with OER initiatives. Together through all of this, we hope that we can enable colleges to move away from proprietary tools like Blackboard and from commercial social networks like Facebook for teaching, and instead have colleges engage the public with their teaching and learning. Thank you very much.
The quadrants on the right are details of the second word from the second line. The accurate color image is actually quite good. It is better than conventional digitization and no worse than first-hand inspection. The second square shows the texture on the surface through a low angle of raking light. RTI is comparable to raking light, except the texture is interactive and can be enhanced. The third square shows a color enhancement that uses all the bands of spectral imaging, but resembles human perception. The fourth square uses principal component analysis to find the greatest contrast possible and render those contrasts in stark colors. The implementation phase seeks to make these tools available to any scholar, museum, or library. In the first year, we will make a fully open demonstration of what the technology can do. To reach the most people, we will publish significant text from the Biblioteca Ambrosiana using standards for accessibility and interoperability, notably the International Image Interoperability Framework. In the second year, we will introduce the repository to scholars and build scholarly content with annotations in the repository. James Vanderkam of Notre Dame, Annette Reed of Penn, and I will convene an open workshop for scholars who want to learn about the visualization tools and how to contribute annotations. By the end of the second year, we expect to have a very cool demonstration of the potential of special RTI to make a significant impact on scholarship. In the third year, we will make the technology easily available to anyone who wants it. We will prepare manuals and software to download and run off the shelf. Everything will be free and community supported through GitHub and the ImageJ software suite. We will offer demonstrations and training workshops around the country. If you would like to host or attend one of these workshops, it is never too early to get in touch. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rochester. I'm with the Scholars Lab at the University of Virginia Library. Today I'm here to talk about NeatLine. This is software for creating online exhibits based off of archival collections. The exhibits can contain a rich combination of modern maps, historical maps, timelines, images, and short and long-form text. And these exhibits can be focused around each of these components, and each of these components can be used to navigate through the entire exhibit. Neatline is a plugin for Omeka, which of course is kind of like WordPress for exhibits for small GLAM institutions. And Neatline enriches this ecosystem by adding exhibits that integrate all of these different modalities I just mentioned. Now, Neatline's a fairly mature software project, but this will give us the opportunity to improve it for the future as well as to add some interesting new features. And broadly, our goals for this phase of Neatline's development is sustainability, and we're thinking about this in two ways. First, sustainable code. Okay. We want to bring all the components that comprise Neatline up to date. For example, we've hesitated about upgrading the mapping component because the latest version no longer supports Google base layers because of licensing issues, but we'll take this opportunity to address that. We also want to replace the timeline component with a library that is both more modern and better maintained. And at the same time, we'll explore features for richer alternative representations of time, such as nonlinear timelines, speculative time, subjective time, ambiguous time, and so forth. We also want to improve the experience of creating and editing exhibits by focusing on common workflows and making them easier, more streamlined, and more intuitive. Another aspect of the interface that we'll visit is how it works on tablets and phones. One of the beliefs that has driven Neatline is that interacting with your data, with your information in a physical way, changes how you think about it. So enabling people to create and view these exhibits in a more hands-on way opens up new possibilities in how they conceptualize the information that they're working with. And second, we want to contain sustainable communities. We want to empower the community to contribute and to to participate, whether that's through code, through design, tutorials and documentation, or just expressing their opinions, submitting bug reports, requesting features. We want to do this partially by creating a development environment that's easier and faster to get set up in. We want to create a community hub that encourages, facilitates, and showcases all the great work that people are already doing today for creating documentation and content for Neatline. We hope that both these changes to the software itself, and as well as strengthening the larger community around it will put Neatline on a better foot forward for the future. Thank you.
So I'm Jason Mattel. I teach film and media at Middlebury College. And 2 years ago, my colleague Chris Keithley was here paying thanks for receiving our first grant on this program to do a workshop called Scholarship in Sound and Image, a workshop on videographic criticism. Videographic criticism, some of you probably know what a video essay is, sort of online multimedia analysis of film or other moving images. And videographic criticism is a more academic and, we believe, more transformative way of using this technique to really rethink how critics analyze and make arguments about film, television, and other moving images through sounds and images as the raw materials of writing and criticism. So we did this workshop last June. We had a very unexpectedly tremendous interest. We had over 100 applications for 14 slots, and the outcomes were amazing as well. For many of us, it was the best 2 weeks of our professional lives, both participants and the conveners. We followed up with publishing a special issue of the journal In Transition, an online open access journal of videographic criticism that Chris and I helped to co-found, featuring 5 videos produced that were actually started at the workshop, and we have since published 2 others in transition, so 7 publications have come out since then. Additionally, Chris and I co-wrote a short book, or a booklet, that outlines some of the approaches that we took in doing the workshop. And the demand and the buzz was quite high, so we applied for another round and thankfully got it to host the trilogy. So we will be running 2 more rounds of the workshop at Middlebury. In next coming June, we will do it serving 15 graduate students only, and then the following June, 15 postgraduate students, or non-students, PhD holders. We decided to divide that up in order to serve the different needs of those 2 constituencies and allow for creating a real community of practice. Because we found that was the number one outcome for the people there, was that we created a community that was incredibly bonded. And I think having it cross PhD holders and grad students would make it less of a bonding experience. We'll be hosting at Middlebury College again. We will be project directors of it, and we will also feature special guests from our workshop. And I realize the website's not up there, but it's go.middlebury.edu/videographic if anyone is interested. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm David Birnbaum from the University of Pittsburgh. I am blown away by the quality of the interfaces and the visualizations and the modes of interaction that I have seen in this room today. I'm a historical linguist and digital philologist by training, and one of my research areas is the creation of digital scholarly editions. One of my assumptions is that I see too much silicon paper. I see too many digital editions that look just like paper editions with, at best, a search engine and a little bit of scrolling and linking. I believe that the interface is an expression of your scholarship. An interface is part of your interpretation of your edition, and it's the way you communicate part of your interpretation of your edition. And I want to see innovative digital scholarship expressed in innovative editions. For that reason, the interface must meet the goal of the edition. That last bullet point is going to recur on the next slide. The target participant in my institute has been creating text probably in TEI XML, although not necessarily, and understands edition research, understands markup, and wonders, now that I've done all this, how do I get rid of the angle brackets? How do I make an edition out of the text that I've prepared? One of our assumptions is that the research questions need to dictate the tools. In some cases, there may be a readily existing platform that you can drop your texts into, in which case you would be foolish not to use them. But if you're asking research questions that nobody has ever asked before, and if you have perspectives on your text that nobody has imagined before, you're not going to be able to realize those if you are held prisoner by somebody else's imagination. So I want digital humanists to be able to express what they think about their texts by building their editions. The title of this project is actually Make Your Edition, with italics on the your. Those italics didn't make it into your orange sheets, but they are crucial to our expression. So, what about collaboration? Do we partner with computer scientists? I do this all the time. I couldn't do my work without them. But in those collaborations, if the digital humanist does not have a high degree of computer literacy, you're going to miss opportunities. There are going to be miscommunications, even with the best of intentions. I don't write all of the code for my own projects, but my experience has been that those who build digital editions are able to realize their goals more effectively if they understand what's possible on a technical and not just a philological level. Institute is 3 weeks. There are greatly differing degrees of computational literacy in the digital humanities community. Many TEI ninjas don't know what a command line looks like. Is that my 15 seconds? Okay, so week 1, optional. You can get up to speed on that if you need it. If you don't, sit out week 1. Week 2, how to make your edition. Week 3, how to publish your edition and create an interface. One of the things we are after here is sustainable training. We're not going to teach you to use this tool in this programming language, although we will, but that's not the goal. What we want you to be able to do when you finish this is imagine what you want to do and go figure out how to do it, because the tools we are using today, we will not be using 10 years from now. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon. My name's Ruth Arnott. I'm from Queen Mary University of London. And today I'm going to be introducing plans for Early Modern Digital Agendas, an institute on network analysis, which will be hosted here in DC at the Folger Shakespeare Library next July. Networks, of course, are everywhere. Our very bodies might be described as networks. We're composed of neural networks, protein interactions, and gene regulatory networks. Externally, our modern lives are reliant upon mobile phone networks, power grids, social networking platforms. And the NSA, of course, are very interested in how our communication networks can help them to detect security threats. The NSA, however, are not the only people interested in studying networks. Complex networks became an interdisciplinary field in their own right following some key publication in the late 1990s, which showed that the real-world networks that I've just described actually share some very important underlying structures and can therefore be analysed using some of the same computational tools and algorithms. The application of these computational tools to the arts and humanities is very much in its infancy. We have some early work in this area, stuff like Mapping the Republic of Letters and Frank Imretti's work on Hamlet's social network pictured here that has already emerged. We've also heard today about 6 Degrees of Francis Bacon, of course. There is still much work to do, however, before these kinds of methods are natural to the humanities scholars. And for this reason, we are hosting the Early Modern Digital Agendas. This is our 3rd in a series of institutes. The institute will ask the questions: how should we use networks in the humanities, and specifically in early modern studies? How can we integrate quantitative methods from computer science in our work? What's the role of visualization, and how can it help to elucidate or, in fact, obscure meaning? And how do these methods change the way that we write about and disseminate our research? Early modern scholars will be able to apply for one of 12 places on this institute. The faculty will provide presentations on the latest research in this area and hands-on build days, through which participants will be guided through the process of collecting, curating, and formatting their data for visualization and analysis. We aim to provide a range of training from off-the-shelf tools to classes in basic coding for advanced network analysis. We believe the Institute has the potential not only to shape the ways that early modern scholars are using network analysis methods, but also to determine the future trajectory of a field that we might term cultural network analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all for sticking around so long. I am Cheryl Ball. I'm at West Virginia University, and one of my titles is as editor of the online peer-reviewed journal Kairos. It's a journal of rhetoric, technology, and pedagogy. Kairos just published its 20th anniversary issue in January, and one of its key notables is that we publish interactive scholarly multimedia exclusively. So online web texts that are researched and peer-reviewed and published by academics. Thus, the nickname for the institute that I'm going to talk about is called Kairos Camp. So there's 2 types of workshops. The first type of workshop are the author workshops, which then also branch into 2 offerings, similar to what Jason was talking about with his workshops. The first summer, next summer, will be for beginners, and that's where we're going to help humanists create scholarly multimedia projects or digital humanities projects at the beginner level. So taking them from concept, from research question to work plan. How might they get this work done? This will happen over 2-week residencies in Morgantown at WVU. And then the following summer, with potentially a different set of participants, will be the advanced workshop, where we take folks from prototype to published, and not actually published, but submittable at that point. The grant covers travel, food, lodging, and staffing that we're bringing in to help the authors work and build out their pieces over the 2 weeks. Then the other set of workshops that we're offering are for editors and publishers. And you can imagine, with 20 years of experience working with these kinds of texts, I've built up a lot of workflows that work pretty well for how you might develop these kinds of scholarly multimedia texts with authors, how you do peer review for them, how you copy edit and design edit this work, and how you publish this work in a sustainable and preservable way. So I'm sort of mixing a lot of areas here, including library science. During the editor workshops, which are 2-day events which will take place in conjunction with major conferences such as the American Association of University Presses or the Library Publishing Coalition, we'll be teaching editors and publishers who are interested in starting digital media publications or enhancing their skills with publishing digital media to use, we're going to introduce them to the system Vega, which is an academic publishing platform funded by the Mellon Foundation, which incorporates these kinds of digital media workflows into this publishing process. And I happen to be PI on that grant. So we're sort of combining all of these things together for editors and publishers to learn how to do this work. So please let your humanists know in your circles that these 2 workshops are going to be going on. And if you have a university press that you work with or a library publishing unit, let them know, because I'd be happy to work with them in one of these 2 workshops. Thank you very much.